Very good evening to you. I am Ryan Broom with the Wednesday, May 30th edition of the CBC Evening News. And our top story. Prime Minister Mia Mottley is making good on her election promise that within a week of being elected, her government would declare the South Coast sewage situation a national emergency and work to address it immediately. Today, the Prime Minister led a massive delegation on a tour of the plant on the South Coast, as well as the severely affected Graham Hall Nature Sanctuary. CBC's Shane Jones was on that 3-hour tour.
A massive party is behind me, all headed by Prime Minister Mia Mottley. It makes up of ministry officials, officials from the Barbados Water Authority, members of the BTI, the BTMI, the BTPA, all for mission critical, which Prime Minister Mottley says is needed right now. Just after 10. Any and everyone that could be involved in a solution to the sewage problems on the South Coast arrived at the Barbados Water Authority's plant to get a first-hand look at the problem. Prime Minister Mottley arrived shortly after and was greeted by Tourism Minister Kerry Simmons. Along with many members of the cabinet there were MP for the area Ralph Thorne and Information Minister Lucille Moe, Minister of Energy and Water Resources Wilfred Abrams, Kirk Humphrey, who's the Minister of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy, and Dame Billy Miller, Ambassador at Large and Plenipotentiary. The tour party, which included members of the Barbados Association of Professional Engineers, was then briefed by several high-ranking officials of the Barbados Water Authority on the current state of the issue. Prime Minister Mottley was forceful in her discourse as she urged all involved to treat the situation as a national emergency on behalf of the public of Barbados. Several ministers asked frank questions about the situation in trying to determine the best and quickest fix for the problem. After that, Ms. Mottley visited the St. Lawrence Primary School to ensure students and staff were not being negatively affected by this sewage event. The delegation then visited the Graham Hall Nature Sanctuary, where officials were also updated on the situation there. Speaking at the end of the tour, Prime Minister Mottley revealed that she has set a mandate for the relevant parties to present a cabinet paper by tomorrow.
We've agreed that all of the different officials from the Barbados Water Authority, Coastal Zone Unit, the Environmental Protection Department, and the Barbados Association of Professional Engineers, they will all go back to the Water Authority now. They're going to prepare for us a cabinet paper to give us some options in terms of, one, ensuring that we keep the sewage off the streets, and two, that we repair the lines, and three, that we look towards the long-term solutions to be able to make sure that this never happens again, because we intend to move to a level of treatment that will ensure that we don't have raw sewage coming up on the streets or going into the swamp or anywhere like that.
One of the options to be proposed is the building of 2 outfalls to replace the one not working at Needham's Point.
One 8-inch main from this swamp, which as you can see is now almost all sewage, if not all sewage. And two, one that we've asked for as well from the plant itself, which will be a 16-inch main. Both will go beyond the outer reefs so as to ensure minimal damage to the near shore, and both will have the input of Coastal Zone Management Unit as well as the entity that has been working on Barbados's coastal environment for more than 20 years, Baird Engineering.
Ms. Mottley said her government will not be taking any chances because the consequences are dire.
The equipment necessary and the materials necessary for the building of those pipes are treated to as an emergency, and whatever needs to be done to have them here and to have the work done in the shortest possible time, I expect that Cabinet will be kept up to date. I've created a subcommittee chaired by Minister Abrams, and he will meet literally 2 to 3 times a week to make sure that this project stays on time and on target when we make the decisions tomorrow. The Minister of Foreign Affairs has been requested to make approaches to the Canadian government with respect to technical assistance that we will pay for, but that we need a second form of peer review.
Prime Minister Mottley said her Ministry of Economic Affairs will ensure that the resolution of the South Coast and the Bridgetown sewage plant are the top priority on the public sector investment program. So after just under 3 hours of meeting, touring and discussing, officials of the Barbados Water Authority and all interested parties have been given a mandate to go away and prepare a report for Cabinet to address the best way forward for the South Coast sewage issue. Shane Jones, CBC News.
Thanks, Shane. Well, the government of Barbados is very excited about the Caribbean Development Bank's efforts to create resilience in the region. That's according to Minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Marsha Cattle. Speaking to CBC on the sidelines of the CDB's annual Board of Governors meeting, she says, as promised in her party's manifesto, resilience will be a big priority going forward.
Prime Minister would have said during the campaign, and she reinforces it now as Prime Minister, that one of the big concerns, of course, especially because of our debt position, has to be disaster preparedness and climate resilience of our infrastructure, of our coastal area, of our natural environment. So the emphasis on resilience is very much one that we support.
Minister Cattle says another area where government is closely aligned with the CDB is in the area of maritime affairs and the blue economy.
The fact is that our marine environment is 400 times our land environment. And so a big part of the transformation of this government will have to be around exploring and creating opportunities around the blue economy. That relates to everything from having potentially a marina that can service the entire region, to creating job and training opportunities for young men and women in yachting and other related industries.
Thousands more people could be visiting Barbados' shores if regional air carriers heed calls to reduce taxes and fees on flights. Word of this from President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. Warren Smith. He was speaking during the opening ceremony of the bank's Board of Governors annual meeting in Grenada. Our Sharika Griffith reports.
A recent study funded by the Caribbean Development Bank concludes that reducing taxes and airport charges would result in sizable growth in the number of people traveling within the region, a move that would mean significant benefits for Barbados.
The study estimates that these measures would stimulate increases ranging from a low of 5% in Dominica to a high of 18% in St. Kitts and Nevis over a 20-year period. In the case of St. Kitts and Nevis, this expansion amounts to approximately 65,000 passengers, or almost twice the population of this Twin Island state. The biggest beneficiaries in absolute terms would be Barbados and St. Lucia, with 200,000 and 140,000 additional passengers, respectively.
Dr. Smith was speaking during the opening of the Caribbean Development Bank's annual Board of Governors meeting at the Grenada Trade Center. He took the time to welcome newly installed Minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Marsha Cattle.
Some of you might not be aware, but only a few months ago, Ms. Cattle was a member of our staff. Now there she is sitting over there as one of my bosses.
In keeping with the meeting's theme of resilience, Chairman of the CDB's Board of Governors, Dr. Keith Mitchell, says storms and hurricanes need not be catastrophic events, but this was oftentimes the case because of poverty and other social weaknesses.
We must redouble our efforts to improve the conditions for the most vulnerable in our societies, so that they are empowered and supported to manage disasters and climate risks. Our vulnerability reduction policies must recognize gender rigidities and target women and children especially, because they tend to be disproportionately affected by natural disasters.
The discussion surrounding building resilient cities and air transport competitiveness continued with 2 seminars in the afternoon. Reporting from St. George's, Grenada, Sharika Griffith, CBC News.
Thanks, Sharika. Well, Barbados has developed another culturally unique event as it continues to make its tourism product distinctly different in the highly competitive industry. It's a rum and sweet food tour on June 10th that exposes patrons to the island's culinary traditions and rum. Held in association with the Carmitas brand, the bus ride starts at Queen's Park with the convoys departing at noon, 1 and 2 p.m. The buses make several stops for patrons to sample a variety of dishes along the way before the culinary climax at Barclays Park on the East Coast. The event producer Alison Seeley-Smith says there will be a feast.
You get to choose from some delicious roasted breadfruit, from yellow meat, all kinds of toppings. Or for those of us who have a deep appreciation for the pig, you can go to the lunch tin. And I mean, we're talking everything pork. We're talking pulled pork. We're talking spare ribs. We're talking ham. We're talking, this is a pea into the pig. And then, you can also head over to Chill and Breeze restaurant where award-winning chef Max Benz, he is putting on a Sunday spread. All things traditionally associated with some Barbados Sunday food.
Now, the main sponsor for the event is the Barbados Tourism Product Authority. Manager for Innovation and Strategy, Terry Vanderpool Fox, says the tour fits into Barbados's ongoing efforts to distinguish its tourism product.
The modern-day traveler is looking for authentic experiences, and one such way to enjoy our culture is through our food. There's definitely a symbiotic relationship between food and the tourism industry. Most importantly, food has been recognized as an effective promotional and positioning tool for many countries. With an increasing interest in local cuisine, more destinations are focusing on food as their core tourism product.
Well, it was a case of you just had to see it to believe it. Some freak accidents on the island's roads this morning. That and more stories coming up in the CBC Evening News. Welcome back. Well, a number of people escaped serious injury after a couple of bizarre accidents today. But quick work by a number of Good Samaritans was a key factor in each case. Our Cream Smith was at both of them.
A number of unusual accidents unfolding today. Just behind me is one of them, a white Toyota Corolla overturned on the side of the ABC highway. It happened around 12:30 this afternoon. The other Corolla involved was near the middle of the Clyde Walcott roundabout. It had a badly damaged front bumper. The two occupants, a man and a woman, were in no mood to speak to us about what happened, but said they weren't hurt. The unidentified driver of the overturned vehicle, a female, wasn't so lucky. 20-year-old Jade Agard was driving towards the roundabout as the drama unfolded.
I just saw the car flip, and as soon as the car flipped, I yelled at my mother to stop and told her, get out the car, get out the car. We ran over here. About 3 guys pulled her out to the vehicle. I ran to her side and asked her if anything was wrong with her. I asked her to lay flat on her back, and I just kept her covered and protected from the media till the ambulance got here.
At the scene, the injured woman was complaining of pain to her hand and hip. Miss Agard, a certified first responder, did her best to help.
But my attention more so was on her because I know that experience, and I know how she felt right there and then laying down there on that floor. Is a feeling of loneliness, despair. You feel lost, and I just wanted to reassure her and make sure that everything was okay with her.
Meanwhile, at the JTC Ramsey Circle, also known as the Bussa roundabout, a 37-year-old woman found herself in a precarious position following a collision with a truck. According to reports, both she and the driver of a C.O. Williams construction truck were exiting the roundabout and traveling toward Pine Hill Dairy when it happened. Thankfully, both escaped serious injury. However, the Vitz was badly damaged and left perched on the top of the Jersey barrier. It's still unclear exactly how that happened, but police are investigating. Up to the time of this report, they haven't released the names of those involved in the 2 collisions. Kareem Smith, CBC News.
Thanks, Kareem. Well, police have identified the remains of a man's body discovered yesterday in an area opposite the Frederick Smith Secondary School at Trent, St. James. According to Police Public Relations Officer, Acting Inspector Rodney Innes, it has been positively identified by a close family member as that of 60-year-old Trevor Clavier Marshall of 1st Avenue, Jackson, St. Michael. Police say an autopsy will be performed to determine the cause of his death. Marshall is said to be a person who habitually roams and sleeps on the streets. Inspector Innes says Marshall's decomposing body was found on the ground in the area around 9 yesterday morning under a canopy of trees in Trent St. James by a man who was searching the area collecting bottles. Well, drug abuse and violence are becoming the norm for some children. This assertion from Acting Inspector Roland Cobbler, who has responsibility for the force's Drug Abuse Resistance Education, or DARE program. He says during his daily duties, he encounters young people who openly admit to drug use, and it's for this reason, he says, that everything must be done to help them make wise choices.
In a changing society where drugs and violence are having a significant influence in the lives of some children, it's very important that every effort be made to provide children with the necessary knowledge and skills and resources that will assist them in becoming productive members of our society. This is equally important since over time, drug use and violence seemingly are becoming the norm for some. In this regard, children must be educated about the harmful effects and consequences associated with drugs use and violence.
The acting inspector was speaking to graduates of the DARE program from the Eden Lodge Primary School. He told the Class 4 students that as they move on to secondary school, they will encounter many challenges and the choices they make will shape their future.
It's at this time that the decisions that you make will determine your success or your failure. The DARE program provided you with the opportunity to develop basic and core skills that once put into practice will assist you in making the right choices. I want to encourage you to utilize the knowledge and skills acquired during the program so that you can reach your full potential. You have no excuse, since during the program, you also taught how to become good citizens. Remember, you have an important role in shaping the future.
The manager of a leading calypso tent is worried about the waning interest in traditional calypso music. This from Eleanor Rice as the Cape Shepherd All-Stars Calypso tent held a press conference as Crop Over 2018 gets started. She says over the years, the tent has had to make tough decisions to cope with the changing times.
As sentimental as we are about calypso and as we reflect on the good old days, it is a reality that the attitude and response to tents now are not like in the past. Attendances have declined significantly. Airplay for social commentary on radio is low in proportion to the sexier sweet soca and bashment songs, and coverage of the tents on television has all but disappeared.
And the veteran band manager is refusing to be overwhelmed by the challenges. She says a number of entertaining shows are on the cards with a mix of newcomers and familiar faces.
Former junior monarch calypsonian Raheem, veteran Dragon Slayer, now he will be called Slayer, and later in the season, Brian, aka Structure Thornhill, he will be joining us. He is currently the Calypso King in Canada. Marsville, I want to give it to you, will bring sweet soca to the tent, and the charge to the Pick of the Crop crown will be held by perennial finalists Donella and Colin Spencer.
We take a pause here, but still to come, a look at some of the stories making headlines across the region.
Across the Caribbean, brought to you by CIBC First Caribbean.
Welcome back. A leading academic has identified a flaw in the region's response to natural disasters. Professor of Geography at King's College London, Mark Pelling, says in the aftermath of a disaster, immediate consideration is given to rebuilding a country's physical and financial infrastructure. However, he believes there's another critical factor which is often overlooked.
We have a lot of experience, particularly in the Caribbean region, looking at disaster risk and development through physical infrastructure. We have experience, again, the region leads, for example, through the CRIF, by looking at financial infrastructure. But I think we've rather taken for granted the social infrastructure. And I would put those as equally important as the foundations upon which sustainable economies sustainable and stable environments and political systems are built.
The professor was a keynote speaker at the prestigious William G. Damas Memorial Lecture, which has become a signature event during the annual meeting of the Caribbean Development Bank's Board of Governors currently underway in Grenada. He says for this model to work, Caribbean governments will have to work closely with civil society organizations. Professor Pelling also says the youth will have a key role to play.
The Caribbean has an infrastructure and a history of youth leadership that I think has to be part of the solution. I think the relationship between civil society and government is of course important. One of the key challenges is how to engage an active citizenry and connect that to an inclusive political system. So this is the struggle of the Caribbean and many other regions of the world.
In Trinidad, the question is being asked, was there a conspiracy to block communication that could have provided relief to woes on the Sea Bridge? Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley announced plans to purchase 2 brand new passenger ferries from Australian firms. But as he made the announcement, he said he and his delegation stumbled upon some disturbing news during their visit to Australia.
Fresh from his 2-week trip abroad, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley came back with good news about the future of the Sea Bridge. After meeting with Australian shipbuilding companies Austal and Incat, Dr. Rowley says he expects proposals in the coming weeks and government will be moving to purchase a brand new vessel.
As tourism in Tobago grew in the way that we are planning it, a day trip to Trinidad would be an aside for the thousands of visitors in Tobago. And for that to happen, we have to have a sound and secure bridge between Trinidad and Tobago. We need to make that investment now. We've done the groundwork. We've made the contacts. We are ready to make the decisions. It's going to cost us, but it's going to benefit us.
That cost is expected to be around $80 million for one vessel. And according to Dr. Rowley, the intention is to purchase at least 2.
We are to place an order in the very near future for the first of those vessels when the competition tells us which is the best offering, because they're basically the same, but it's who will give us the best deal.
Both companies already have experience in this country, manufacturing the water taxis, Coast Guard vessels and the existing ferries. Dr. Rowley says government will also consider purchasing a patrol vessel from the Australian government. But it wasn't all good news. Dr. Rowley told the news conference today that he and his delegation received unsettling news that he intends to pursue.
We discovered to our horror.
Dr. Rowley says at a time when this country was desperately looking for a replacement vessel to allow the existing ones to go on dry docking, Australian firm Incat reached out to this country, but the message was never communicated.
There were people on the government payroll in Trinidad and Tobago who refused to respond to Incat, who were in a position to make vessels available to us. But the government employees here were telling the board, can't find nothing, but they were finding ocean flower and Cabo Star for us.
In Guyana, 2 prison officers have landed in hot water after they were busted on Sunday with 1 pound of ganja. They say they felt they had been carrying food and not ganja into the prison, but the director of prisons is not buying their story. Krista McClingham reports.
It's a ridiculous excuse, says Director of Prisons Gladwin Samuels. Jail-savvy prison officers could not be so easily duped to believe they were transporting food wrapped up that way. The bottom line is that the package contained compressed marijuana, and even if they felt it was food, they violated prison regulations, the director added.
And then when you listen to the excuse, it is extremely, extremely outrageous. Prison officers are taught during basic recruit training course because one person was recruited in 2016, March, and the other was recruited in November of 2017. So they're fresh from training school basically. And they are aware that they do not have the authority to take any items into the prison for any prisoner. Yet, one of the officers' excuse was that he collected the items with the belief that it was eatables to take for a prisoner breakfast. Ridiculous.
Mr. Samuels explained that prison officers are not allowed to receive food items outside of the lockups to take for any prisoner.
First is that you are not authorized to collect these items. Secondly, even if for some reason you collect the items, what prevented you from checking to verify what is the content of what you're collecting? And then the person who collected the items give it to another prison officer who placed it in his haversack. So I have reasons to believe that there was collusion between the two ranks.
The prison director stated that another line of inquiry is being actively pursued as to why these prison officers were involved in this unlawful act, and the spotlight has been shifted to another suspected rogue rank.
And what is also important, or what was also revealed, it is a rank who was recently interdicted from Lusignan Holding Bay for suspectedly throwing contraband into the prison. He is the person that contacted both of the officers just a moment before they collected the items at the hospital.
Across the Caribbean, brought to you by CIBC First Caribbean.
Well, a glimpse into what's happening in the world of sports is coming up with Mark Seal, but first, here's a tip from Cooperators General Insurance.
Tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
Asthmatics and their families should learn as much as they can about asthma. By understanding the condition and having it properly assessed and treated, control can be kept and maintained. This tip is brought to you in association with the Asthma Association of Barbados.